we've got the highlights from February 5th. These are the best takes. We've got a new look, so we're giving that a try. Like, these are the highlights, though. And let's rock.
Promised was to axe the tax, build the homes, fix the budget, and stop the crime. The Prime Minister, with the support of the NDP, passed catch and release that allows career car thieves to be released the same day they are caught stealing cars, to have house arrest, and to have shorter sentences, many of which they serve in their living room watching Netflix. That has led to a 100% increase in car theft in Montreal and Ottawa, and a 300% increase in Toronto. Will they reverse these disastrous and reckless policies so that we can stop the crime?
Of course, this government has a comprehensive plan on
auto
theft. It's interesting, though, the leader this week is pretending to care about food prices and about competition in the grocery sector. This week he's pretending to care about auto theft, Mr. Speaker, but we find out that his campaign manager, the woman to whom he owes the leadership of this party, is addressing he and his caucus and advising them on food prices. What is her advice, and what does he owe his campaign manager, Mr. Speaker?
Her advice is to axe the tax, build the homes, fix the budget. This Prime Minister is not worth the cost and not worth the crime. We now are paying $1 billion more in insurance premiums because he has led to a quadrupling of car thefts in Toronto. I have a common sense plan, which I rolled out today, to end house arrest and catch and release for career criminals and bring in 3 years of jail for 3 stolen cars. Will this government accept the common sense plan?
I'm very happy that the Leader of the Opposition, after reading a government press release, has finally tuned into this issue. But a couple of clarifications.
Right?
Mandatory minimums for auto theft for repeat offenses already exist in the criminal code. So you're not changing something that already exists. Secondly, as an aggravating factor for an auto theft that occurs with organized crime, that's already on the books too. 718.2 of the criminal code, Mr. Leader of the Opposition. Why don't we focus on things we can actually do, like getting tough with organized crime and anti-money laundering?
To mandatory minimums for car auto theft. And furthermore, the minister claimed that he brought in bail reform that would stop auto theft, only that their bail reform doesn't apply to auto theft. So he's got to read his own law before trumpeting it in the Parliament. Mr. Speaker, they've given us a 300% increase in auto theft in Toronto, a 300% increase in auto claims this year alone. That is their record. We have a common sense plan to stop the crime. Why won't they implement it today?
The opposition purports to be tough on crime. You know who I listen to about crime measures? Police officers. You know what they tell me, Mr. Speaker? The first thing we'll cut is the Liberal NDP carbon tax. More affordable for Canadians. Because Canadians are paying more for food than they ever have before, with 2 million people relying on a food bank every month. The Prime Minister's solution, let's make food even more expensive. On April 1st, they plan to increase the carbon tax by 23%. Part of their plan to quadruple the carbon tax. Conservatives have a common sense bill, C-234, which will remove the carbon tax for farmers, making food more affordable for Canadians. Why will the Prime Minister not cancel his plan to increase the carbon tax on April 1st to ensure Canadians can feed their families? Tell me that this isn't an individual crime. This is backed by people who are organized criminals. How do we deal with that? We get tough on money laundering. When he's asking me to read the law, I'd ask him to read C-59. That has measures that deal with money laundering that you're voting against.
The NDP government continues to scam Canadians with their carbon tax. They said it would reduce emissions. It didn't. They said Canadians would get more in these phony rebates, and they don't. And they plan to increase this carbon tax scam in April, making the cost of everything go up. As 2 million Canadians visit a food bank in a single month, a third of which are children. After 8 years, this Prime Minister is not worth the cost. Will the Liberals stop their plans to increase the carbon tax scam on April the 1st, making the cost of gas, groceries, and home heating even more expensive?
I find it incredulous that the opposition is speaking about scams. When you think about the advice that they are giving Canadians to invest in volatile cryptocurrency, to fire the Governor of the Bank of Canada, one of Canada's foremost institutions, and to vote not once, not twice, but 120 times against supports for Canadians, including our armed forces and including Ukraine. That's the height of hypocrisy. hypocrisy, Mr.
That makes Canadians' lives even harder and even more expensive every single time. Conservatives are on the side of Canadians who are having to go into food banks more than ever before and making the cost of gas, groceries and home heating more expensive because of their carbon tax scam. This Liberal NDP government is immune to the pain that they're causing on Canadians because they're always working for the Liberal insiders and consultants. Why don't they scrap the scam and axe the tax to bring down the cost of gas, groceries and home heating already?
After the news this weekend about insiders, I find it rich coming from the opposition that they're going to criticize that point. But I will ask them in return, what is it that they would cut? Are they going to cut supports to Ukraine and the Canadian Armed Forces? Yes. Are they going to cut affordable housing, Mr. Speaker? Are they going to cut the Canada Child Benefit and $10 a day childcare? Let's hear it. What are they going to cut?
The first thing we'll cut is the Liberal NDP carbon tax. More affordable for Canadians. Because Canadians are paying more for food than they ever have before, with 2 million people relying on a food bank every month. The Prime Minister's solution? Let's make food even more expensive. On April 1st, they plan to increase the carbon tax by 23%, part of their plan to quadruple the carbon tax. Conservatives have a common sense bill, C-234, which will remove the carbon tax for farmers, making food more affordable for Canadians. Why will the Prime Minister not cancel his plan to increase the carbon tax on April 1st to ensure Canadians can feed their
Rich coming from this opposition talking about food prices when we know that that member's campaign chair, campaign manager, senior advisor, the person that walks into their caucus every week and gives them advice is the chief lobbyist for Loblaws in this country, Canada's leading food retailer.
Doesn't sound
Mr.
good.
Speaker, instead of talking about axe the tax, maybe they should axe the hacks.
From the Liberals is incredible as they continue to avoid the real question. Canadian farmers should be applauded for their environmental accomplishments instead of being punished by the carbon taxes from this Liberals. Why? To produce a ton of canola in Saskatchewan is 67% lower than the carbon footprint of European wheat. You can transport wheat, Canadian wheat, 3.5 times around the world before it has the same global footprint of wheat grown in Europe. But the Prime Minister wants to punish farmers instead of rewarding them for their environmental stewardship. Why won't the Prime Minister cancel his carbon tax increase on farmers to make sure that we can grow food for Canadians?
The bullies, he is the one who is picking on vulnerable people, standing with Danielle Smith instead of defending the most vulnerable youth in our country. Mr. Speaker, he has shown Canadians who he is, and Canadians will not forget.
Manipulate the facts all day long, but that's not going to change the painful reality that Canadians across this country are experiencing. Let's not forget that the PBO has said that Canadians will still be paying hundreds of dollars in carbon tax even after the rebate. Canadians who are already struggling to afford gas, groceries, and home heating cannot afford this NDP Liberal government's carbon tax increase. Will the Liberals show some compassion and cancel their April 1st carbon tax increase?
If the Conservatives are truly concerned about the price of groceries, why don't they just ask their top advisor to pick up the phone and talk to Loblaws? Or perhaps the next time she goes to pick up her paycheck, she could just ask Loblaws to join in our work to bring down lower grocery prices, to bring in more competition, and to get rid of predatory practices. Mr. Speaker, if the Conservatives are truly concerned for Canadians, I know just the person they can have to give their buddies at Loblaws a call.
Denying trans kids their basic human rights by denying their access to life-saving health care. It's not the role of politicians to tell doctors how to treat patients. Meanwhile, this leader of the Conservative Party remains shamefully silent on attacks on trans rights. The hate and prejudice of some should never override the fundamental rights of others. Will this government commit to using the powers of the Canada Health Act to intervene in any denial of life-saving care for trans youth?
And hours on the phone consoling people who are crying on the phone, asking how we can stand up for the rights of two LGBTQ people in Alberta. Mr. Speaker, we are going to continue to work on this, and I have one message for Albertans and people across the country. Legal challenges notwithstanding, the one way we can stop this is to kill the bill before it gets to the legislature. So write to your UCP members, get fired up, mobilize, because kids' rights matter.
Deserve affordable quality childcare, and childcare workers need livable wages. wages. But the Liberals are letting the $10 a day childcare program fail by not giving workers fair pay and benefits, leaving parents without childcare spots. And the Conservatives, they want for-profit childcare. This means higher fees for parents and lower wages for workers. Liberals and Conservatives don't care about care workers. When will the Liberals finally enforce livable wages and benefits for childcare workers so they can live in dignity?
Our national childcare program is making life more affordable for thousands of Canadian families. As is the Canada Child Benefit. We continue to work with the provinces and territories to ensure that the 5-year agreements are upheld, that we do see improvements to wages and benefits for the essential caregivers that we all rely on for the childcare that our kids need. On this side of the House, we continue to do the hard work, and we continue to see the Conservatives oppose every step of the way.
In Canada, stolen cars now cost Canadians over $1 billion a year in insurance rates. Car thefts are up 300% in Toronto. That's thanks to the catch and release legislation that turns violent offenders loose onto the streets, allowing them to commit more crime. When will they reverse their disastrous policies, put the bad guys in jail so that Canadians can keep their cars?
He represents a part of the Greater Toronto Area, as do I.
What I hear from my constituents,
people throughout the 905, is that they're concerned about criminality, and they applaud the fact that we took steps to ensure with bail reform that serious violent repeat offenders are being kept off our streets. The other thing they applaud is when we work hand in hand with the police to keep our communities safe. So when I'm standing with the chief of the Durham Police and a progressive Conservative premier and giving them $121 million to help with law enforcement, they're saying that's a step in the right direction and there's more to come.
Explain this to the Attorney General, but bail reform doesn't apply to auto theft. It's thanks to their policies that you can get arrested in the morning and go back to committing crimes in the evening. And if you happen to get sentenced, you can serve the sentence in the comfort of your own home while watching Netflix or even Disney+. That is Canada's justice system after 8 years of this Liberal NDP government. So when will this Liberal government listen to common sense Conservative policies, repeal the catch and release, the stay-at-home sentencing, and finally put offenders in jail where they belong?
Ronnie is the worst.
The interventions from the member opposite, but if we're going to talk about the criminal code, let's talk about the mandatory minimum that still exists for repeat auto theft offenders under 331.1 sub A. Let's talk about the fact that when you commit an auto theft crime and you're involved with organized criminality, that's already an aggravating factor on sentencing. Oh yes, that was 718.2 sub A sub 4. Please take note. The important piece is that we are bringing together stakeholders, auto industry, every actor that's involved in this system to ensure we tackle this at every dimension. That conversation is happening this week. It's too bad they won't be there for it.
The time for talk has passed.
Sorry,
it will take
like
loans and loan guarantees to cover these illegal duties. The CUSMA litigation process needs a better framework to prevent these dirty, dilatory tricks. We must call for a tax exemption for private forests, which have nothing to do with these allegations by the U.S., and we have to ensure that Washington recognizes that the Quebec forestry regime is compliant with the free trade regulations. We want to collaborate with the government, but it needs to take action. What is it waiting for?
Makes sense,
the Honourable Minister
but Mary
of International Trade
is an ignorant minister.
I agree with my honourable colleague.
No
Those
French.
tariffs are unwarranted. They're unjust. We need to keep standing up for Canadians, forestry workers, and the sector. I appreciate the suggestions coming from my honourable colleague, and I think what you have seen the government do time and time again is work in support of the sector, particularly through our trade commissioners, where we have helped Canadian forestry companies to expand and to diversify. We need to keep doing this, but I welcome the suggestions coming from my honourable colleague and look forward to working with him. Thanks so much.
It's not worth the cost and the crime. Auto theft is up 300% in Toronto and 100% in Ottawa and Montreal in the last 8 years of his catch and release policies. But his minister says, oh, don't worry. There's already a mandatory jail time provision in 3331A of the criminal code. Yes, it's only for 6 months. Today we propose a mandatory 3 years for 3 cars stolen. Will they support this common sense change? Yes or no?
For returning to the chamber and returning to this issue. It's an important one, and it's really important to understand the full complexity of the issue. This touches the auto industry, this touches our ports, this touches the criminal code, this touches the CBSA. What I would note for Canadians is that under that party's watch, when that member was actually a cabinet minister, frontier agencies like the CBSA were actually cut. So in terms of providing the resources to keep Canadians safe, it's an interesting record that they've got. I wouldn't be too proud defending it.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
His main criticism is that when we were in government, we delivered safe streets at a low cost.
Right.
That's right, we spent less. There was less crime and less costs. That's a good thing. With them, you get more costs and more crime. So why won't they follow our common sense plan to bring down costs and crime by keeping repeat car theft criminals in jail now?
The hypocrisy of the Leader of the Opposition. This week, he pretends to care about auto theft. He's getting comprehensive answers from the Attorney General, Minister of Justice on what we're doing. He just has empty slogans, and I'll give him some empty slogans. What does this member's campaign manager tell him about food prices? What does she tell him about her lobbying activities with Loblaws? He comes in here shouting slogans like axe the tax. He needs to axe the hacks.
I have right here an announcement from the king of lobbying, Hill and Knowlton, which brought on a special national leader of financial communications, who is that member right there.
Big Bird.
Kingpin lobbyist over there trying to distract from the fact that crime is raging out of control. Today I announced a common sense plan to end catch and release and house arrest for repeat car theft criminals. Will they adopt this common sense plan to stop the crime?
Pretty clear that the Conservatives are off their game today, Mr. Speaker. What has happened here is that their campaign manager, the woman who has contributed, to whom the Leader of the Opposition owes his job, has been exposed as the lead lobbyist for Loblaws, Canada's leading food retailer.
It's clear that well-connected insiders have never had it as good as they do under this NDP Liberal government. The Arrive Scam Watchdog report found a made-for-insiders process for this $54 million spend, where qualified companies were cut from contracts if they didn't have the right connections and experience. High-priced insiders got paid every time. This wasn't a bug in the system. It was a feature in a process designed to drive up costs and reward insiders.
Wow.
It's clear that this Prime Minister is not worth the cost. The only explanation for this insider protection scheme is incompetence or corruption. So which is it?
Listening to the member opposite's question about
O'Connell's
insiders, collusion, corruption, I thought he was talking about their chief advisor, who is also serving as Loblaws lobbyist. And Mr. Speaker, isn't it interesting how they are blocking legislation to reduce grocery prices?
Daughter of Chucky.
When it comes to our government's record on issues of Arrive Can, Mr. Speaker, all procurement policies must be followed. We have made this very clear. Any reporting of wrongdoing will come with consequences. Can the members opposite say the same for their own house?
Absolutely nothing to do with the question. That's right. There is a sham investigation. The government's investigator admitted that he's not independent. His job depends on the government's pleasure. We have with the Arrive scam, when whistleblowers criticize the government, they're suspended without pay. When witnesses defend the government, they're protected. It's a $54 million Arrive sham. This Prime Minister is not worth the cost in spending or in corruption. After 8 years, why is this government continuing to protect their Arrive scam, Arrive sham insider friends?
Why are they continuing to protect those people?
Following the rules and procedures set out. Mr. Speaker, CBSA is conducting audits, internal investigations. The police are being called in when necessary. And Mr. Speaker, let me be very, very clear. Any reports of wrongdoing will come with consequences. The Arrive Can app was created at a time to keep Canadians safe, and we expect contracts to be issued following the rules.
For 8 years, this Liberal NDP government wouldn't know accountability if they were hit over the head with it. Today, the government
Operations Committee heard from the Border Services Agency's head of professional integrity. The lesson: this is a kangaroo court for the government to investigate its own department. Mindone, the chief information officer during ArriveCan, has been accused of deleting key emails, but the investigator reports to the senior officials at the same department that bought ArriveCan. So will this coalition government hold those in charge accountable, or do they plan to hide the dirt like they usually do?
Speaker, we have said time and time again that we support the work that is being done at committee. The minister has instructed the president of CBSA that, she should be very clear and open with the committee on the work that they are doing. Mr. Speaker, they are providing, there is initial interim reports, there are more investigations happening, and Mr. Speaker, once again, we put in place the ArriveCan app to help Canadians during an extraordinary time, and we expect contracts to be fulfilled following all the rules and procurement practices.
This week, every MP in this House will have a chance to vote in solidarity with Ukraine by voting in favor of the Canada-Ukraine Free Trade Agreement. It's important to remember that the Ukrainian people are not just fighting for their own security, they're also fighting for our security, and we need to be fighting for them. Our government has been unequivocal in our support for Ukraine, but under this leader, Conservatives have abandoned Ukraine. They voted against Operation Unifier, against military aid, and they've used their climate change denialism as an excuse to vote against this free trade agreement.
Baker
the
is
Minister
crazy.
of International Trade clarify the environmental provisions in this agreement and explain why it is so important that everyone vote in solidarity with Ukraine.
The Honourable Minister for International Trade.
I want to thank the member for Etobicoke Centre for his strong advocacy for
crappy
his constituents and for Ukrainian Canadians. For months, this Conservative leader claimed that the Canada-Ukraine Free Trade Agreement would impose a price on pollution on Ukraine. Last week in this House, the member for Sarnia-Lambton confirmed that, in fact, Ukraine has had a price of pollution since 2011. I would say and ask the Conservatives, join everyone in this House,
looks like
vote
this,
and support Ukraine.
She
vote
backs
for
the
Canada-Ukraine Free Trade
Ukraine.
Agreement. President Zelensky wants it. Canadians want it. Conservatives should support Ukraine.
Gulf Islands.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We all remember 2015 will be the last election under first past the post. Now, without access to a time machine, it's simply not possible anymore to keep that promise. But this House
I
has
think
an
the Green
opportunity
Party kind
to reach out
of is
to
dying a slow
disillusioned and
death.
frustrated Canadians who so desperately want fair voting. We have a chance to pass Motion 86 on Wednesday. Will the Prime Minister support this motion?
It's always fun hanging out with you guys. Like, we do the question periods every day, so you can catch that live, like 10 after 3. We're there every day, like every single day. And it's so much fun. We're growing a community. It's a blast. And participate in some of that. Like, share, subscribe. I'm Ehren, Question Period Canada. We do have questions. Hope you had something healthy to eat today and are able to stay warm tonight. We'll catch you tomorrow. Can't wait to see you.